Hi everyone, how are you? This is our lecture video 3 in semester 2 for week 22. Okay? The objectives covered in this lecture. If you remember, the last lecture we took comprehension and phonics. This time we're going to cover a new grammar lesson and a new writing part. So, we're going to demonstrate awareness of complex sentences. So we're going to get introduced to a third type structure, which is the complex sentence. You're going to use subordinating conjunctions to make complex sentences. You will be able to differentiate between dependent and independent clauses, so you will get introduced to a new type of clauses, and at the end in the writing you will produce an expository or informational paragraph. Okay, so the resources for this lecture are the grammar book, pages 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20, and the writing part in worksheet 2, semester 2. Okay, to start with the grammar part, first of all, let's revise the two structure types that we have covered before. First of all, we covered the simple sentence. We said that a simple sentence has one subject and one predicate, if you want to say one verb also. So the simple sentence has one subject and one complete predicate. Example, I like to study grammar. I is the subject, okay, the complete subject, and like to study grammar is the complete predicate. So here I have only one subject and one predicate, so I have a simple sentence. Also, a simple sentence is also called an independent clause. If you remember, we said that the simple sentence contains only one independent clause. The independent clause ends with a period or a semicolon, okay? So the independent clause ends with a period or a semicolon. Again, we repeat, the simple sentence has one subject, one predicate. So the simple sentence is equal to one independent clause. The simple sentence is equal to one independent clause. The independent clause must end with a period or a semicolon. Example on a simple sentence, I love you. So one subject and one verb, one predicate. The independent clause only has one subject and one verb or one predicate. What about the compound sentence? Compound sentence. We said that the compound sentence is made up of two or more simple sentences, or two or more independent clauses, joined together by one of the following ways. We had two ways to join independent clauses or simple sentences to make a compound sentence. The first way was a comma and one of the fanboys, comma plus one of the fanboys for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. Example, I like to study grammar and I love this class. You see, the first way we joined the both independent clauses with comma and. The first independent clause, I like to study grammar, this is the first independent clause, the first simple sentence. And the second independent clause, or the second simple sentence, I love this class. So we joined both sentences together with comma and the fanboy and. Or the second way, simply you can add a semicolon after the first independent clause. I like to study grammar. So I add a semicolon after the first independent clause. Then I write the second independent clause, I love this class. More example about compound sentences. I love you, comma, and you love me. Okay, so I have first independent clause, I love you. Second independent clause, you love me. So two independent clauses joined together make in a correct way, either with a comma and a fanboy or a semicolon, to make a compound sentence. Okay, now it's time to start with the complex sentences. The complex sentences. What do I mean by complex sentences? Let's see. First of all, what is a complex sentence? A complex sentence is a simple sentence. So first, it's a simple sentence or an independent clause to which a part of sentence, the dependent clause has been added. So we add the independent clause to a second part of the sentence that is called dependent clause. So in other words, we can say that in the complex sentence we find an independent clause and a dependent clause. Independent clause and a dependent clause together, they make one complex sentence. Let's have examples. Why not? Because I like to study grammar, I love this class. Because I like to study grammar, this is called a dependent clause. I love this class, this is called independent clause. Or you can write it in another way, you can switch both clauses. I love this class because I like to study grammar. Okay, so the complex sentence is made up of a dependent clause and an independent clause joined together. Example on a complex sentence. Because you love me, I love you. The first one, because you love me, is the dependent clause. I love you is the independent clause. So a dependent clause joined to an independent clause, together they make a complex sentence. But why do we call it a dependent clause? The dependent clause needs the rest of the sentence for support. So the dependent clause cannot stand alone. It needs support. It needs help from another part or another clause. So that's why we add the independent clause to the dependent clause. Or in other words, let me tell you something, that if you take the dependent clause alone, because you love me, it will not give you a complete idea. It will look like it's missing something. So it needs support. It needs help. Who helps the dependent clause? The independent clause helps the dependent clause. So the dependent clause cannot stand alone, cannot work alone. It needs support. So the independent clause comes and helps the dependent clause. So, because you love me is a dependent clause, and the dependent clause contains a subject. There is a subject and there is a verb in the dependent clause. It begins with a subordinating conjunction. It begins with a subordinating conjunction. Because is called a subordinating conjunction. If you remember, in the compound sentences we said we use coordinating conjunctions. Here in the complex sentences we use subordinating conjunctions, and I'm going to show you a list of the subordinating conjunctions at the end of the lesson. So the dependent clause contains a subject and a verb and begins with subordinating conjunction. So it does not express a completed thought or a completed idea. That's why we cannot say that it can stand alone. So you see the difference now between dependent clause and independent clause? A dependent clause is also called subordinate clause. We can also call it subordinate clause sometimes, but let's use dependent clause. So dependent clauses, like babies, cannot stand alone. They are like babies. They cannot stand alone. They need help and they need support. And who supports the dependent clauses? The independent clauses. So in brief, the dependent clause starts with a subordinating conjunction and contains subject and verb, but it doesn't give a complete idea, so it needs help. Who helps the dependent clause? Here comes the function of the independent clause to help the dependent clause and to support it. Okay, now it's time to see how to punctuate the complex sentences. Since dependent clauses are only part of a sentence, you can never connect them to another sentence with a semicolon. So the first rule is that you can't use semicolons in complex sentences. Don't use semicolons, okay? Semicolons are only used between two independent clauses. You see, semicolons are only used between independent clauses. But in case you have a dependent clause and an independent clause, you cannot use a semicolon between them. Example, I have loved you for years, semicolon, although I never admitted it. Here the semicolon is wrong. I cannot use a semicolon. No, it's wrong. Okay? I have loved you for years, although I never admitted it. Okay, it is correct. Okay? When you start with the independent clause, Okay, you do not add anything, neither a semicolon nor a comma before the dependent clause. Or in other words, when the dependent clause comes at the end of the sentence, then there is no need to add a comma. There is no need to add a comma. But in case the dependent clause comes at the beginning of the complex sentence, then you have to add a comma after the dependent clause. Imagine that here the sentence says, although I never admitted it, then I have to add a comma and continue, I have loved for you for years. Okay? In case you start with the independent clause, then you do not add a comma here. But if you start with the dependent clause, then you have to add a comma after the dependent clause. But never, never, never use a semicolon between a dependent and independent clauses. Okay? Okay, now it's time to get introduced to some common subordinating conjunctions or dependent conjunctions. The subordinating conjunctions, I repeat, are found at the beginning of the dependent clause. We find the subordinating conjunctions at the beginning of the dependent clause. We can use after for time, we show actions that happened after each other. Although, opposite ideas, as, who when we want to talk about a person, because for a reason, before it's similar to after, but it's opposite to it, similar in meaning, we use it for time, we mean. Even if, here if there is a condition, even though, also opposite ideas, if a condition, whenever we use it for time, whose for possession, whom for people, once we mean time, why for reason, since also for reason, so that there is a result here, than, that, though, unless, until, when, in case, where, whereas, wherever, whether, which, and while. The most common used subordinating conjunctions that we want to focus on are because, before, after, although, if, who, that, where, and which. Okay, we're going also to use since, why. Okay, the others are used, but we want to focus on this. We also want to focus on when. Okay, we can use also though. So the most common subordinating conjunctions that we need to focus on are after, although, who, because, before, if, whom, why, since, that, though, when, where, which. Okay? One more note about the subordinating conjunctions. The subordinating conjunctions who, whose, whom, which, and that are called relative pronouns. Okay, they are called relative pronouns. So when you see who, whose, whom, which, that, we call them relative pronouns. But when you see the subordinating conjunctions where, when, and why are called relative adverbs. Okay, who, whose, whom, which, that are called relative pronouns. Where, when, and why are called relative adverbs. Okay, the other subordinating conjunctions are called subordinating conjunctions. Open your grammar practice books now on page 16. We start from page 16. The first exercise says, read each clause on the lines provided. Write I if the clause is independent and can stand alone as a sentence. Write D if it's independent and cannot underline the subordinating conjunction if it's a dependent clause. So here I just have to say if it's a dependent and independent. Okay, in case it is dependent, then I have to circle the subordinating conjunction. Number one, she got a perfect score. She got a perfect score. Subject, I have a predicate and I have a complete idea, then it is an independent clause. It can stand alone. Second one, because she was so smart. Because she was so smart. Okay, it has a subject, a verb, it has a subordinating conjunction because, but it doesn't have a complete idea. So it is a dependent clause. It is a dependent clause, okay? And the subordinating conjunction here is because. Number 3, when it was time to go, it's obvious, it's a dependent clause. It doesn't give a complete idea. And there is a subordinating conjunction when. 4, the school bell rang. The school bell rang. Complete idea, subject, a verb. There is no subordinating conjunction. Then it is an independent clause. Number 5, because of the heat outside. Because of the heat outside. What happened because of the heat outside? There is no complete idea. And there is a subordinating conjunction. Then it is a dependent clause. Okay? Number 6, I felt very sleepy. I, subject, felt very sleepy, predicate, and there is a complete idea. There is no subordinating conjunction, then it is an independent clause. The doctor helped. The doctor helped. It's an independent clause. I have a subject, I have a verb, and I have a complete idea. It is an independent clause. Before I could ask, what happened? Before I could ask, there is no complete idea, and there is a subordinating conjunction, then it is a dependent clause. Number 9, when people drive fast, what happens when people drive fast? I don't know, there is no complete idea, and there is a subordinating conjunction when, then it is a dependent clause. Last one, it can be dangerous. It can be dangerous. This is what? It's an independent clause, right? It has subject, predicate, complete idea, and it doesn't have a subordinating conjunction. It is an independent clause. Okay, now the other exercise on page 17, and I'm going to leave the rest of the exercises to you to solve them. Read each sentence and circle the subordinating conjunction. We read the sentence, we circle the subordinating conjunction. Then, based on the conjunction, write relative pronoun or relative adverb on the line provided. Okay? Number 1, call me when you arrive. When is the subordinating conjunction here? And when is a relative adverb. That's what we agreed on, relative adverb. Okay? 2, this is Harry, whom I met yesterday. Whom is a relative pronoun. Relative pronoun. 3, I fixed the lock. I fixed the lock. Which wasn't easy. Which is the subordinating conjunction, and which is a relative pronoun. Relative pronoun. 4, this was the place where we had lunch. Where is a relative adverb. Okay, we have to keep them in mind. Relative adverb. 5, I know the reason why we can't go. Why is the subordinating conjunction, and why is a relative adverb. 6, Carlos returned the shirt that he just bought. That is the subordinating conjunction, and that is a relative pronoun. It relates to a pronoun. When we say relative pronoun, we mean that they relate to a pronoun. Relative adverb, it relates to a verb. Okay? 7, I cheered for the pitcher who just threw a strike. I cheered for the pitcher who just threw a strike. Who is the subordinating conjunction, and who is a relative pronoun. Relative pronoun. 8, get Manny, whose telephone is ringing. Whose is the subordinating conjunction here. Okay, whose is the subordinating conjunction, and whose is a relative pronoun. 9, she did not know when to make dinner. She did not know when to make dinner. When is the subordinating conjunction and it is a relative adverb. 10. We put our bikes in the garage where they belong. Where they belong. Where is the subordinating conjunction and where is a relative adverb. I think it's enough for you now. You can do the rest of the exercises by yourself on the book. Now, time for writing. So we're going to cover today in the writing informational paragraph or expository paragraph. Okay, what is an informational paragraph first? Let's define the informational paragraph. If you see here, there is a hamburger. You remember the parts of the paragraph based on the hamburger sandwich, the topic sentence, the details, and the concluding sentence. Okay, so here we're going to write a paragraph with the topic sentence, details, and a concluding sentence, but specifically we're going to write informational paragraph or expository paragraph. In an informational or expository paragraph, you give information. You see? Informational paragraph, we mean information. Only you give information. You explain a subject, you give directions, or show how something happens. Okay? In expository writing, linking words like first, second, then, and finally are usually used to help readers follow the ideas. So, first of all, the first thing you have to know about informational paragraph is that you give information or you give directions. Then, you have to use linking words in order to help the reader follow the ideas in the correct chronological order. That's it. How is it different from other paragraphs? The expository writing does not tell a story. So first of all, the expository writing doesn't tell a story. Second, expository writing doesn't persuade a reader but only gives facts and reasons. So we do not convince the reader with anything. No, we just give information. We give facts and reasons. So in other words, we can say that the writer in the informational paragraph doesn't show his or her opinion. The writer doesn't show his opinion in the expository or informational writing. And last, the expository writing uses the simple present tense. Since we're using facts and reasons, we have to use the simple present tense. How to write an expository paragraph now? How to write an expository paragraph? First of all, you have to start with the topic sentence, since the first sentence in the paragraph should be a topic sentence. The topic sentence introduces the subject that the writer will mention facts and information about it. I want to talk about cars, so I have to mention the subject in the topic sentence. I have to mention in the topic sentence that I will talk about cars. After the topic sentence, what comes? After the topic sentence, I will have the supporting details or the supporting sentences. What must I mention in the supporting sentences here? The supporting sentences follow one another in a logical sequence. They follow one another in a correct sequence or order. In other words, you mention the facts and information in a suitable order. I have to mention the facts and information. Pay attention, it's better to give an example on each supporting detail. Okay? So in the supporting details, I have to mention the facts, the reasons, the directions, okay, in the correct order, and it's better to give an example on every supporting detail. Last, in the paragraph, you have to write the concluding sentence now. So the paragraph ends with a concluding sentence that restates the topic sentence using different words. Simply, just you have to repeat the main idea in the concluding sentence but using different words from those used in the topic sentence. Transition signals or linking words. If you remember that at the beginning I said that it's better to use linking words in expository or informational paragraphs to connect the sentences together in a good way and to show the reader, to help the reader figure out that the information are in a correct order. So use linking words or transitional signals to connect sentences together. Examples of these signals are firstly, or you can use first, in the first place, to start, to begin with, second, secondly, in addition, furthermore, moreover, besides. Since here we're adding information in the whole paragraph, so you have to use furthermore, moreover, besides. You can use also third, thirdly, finally, last, last but not least. at the end to conclude, for example, okay, etc. You have a lot of transition signals that you can use while writing informational paragraph. Now let's have an example on an informational paragraph. First of all, you don't forget the title, City Life. So I started simply with the title of 2 words that gives you the overall idea of the paragraph. From the title, I can figure out that I will talk about this city life. Let's see the topic sentence. City life is comforting and full of fun. City life is comforting and full of fun. So you see, simply. In the topic sentence, I mentioned the main idea that city life comforting and full of fun. So I'm going to talk in the details how city life is comforting and full of fun. So let's start to give you information about city life. There are parks and picnic spots to visit in the city. There are parks and picnic spots to visit in the city. This is the first fact. We have cinema halls to see movies. We have electricity which runs our factories, lights, and cools our home and helps us in watching TV. So this is the third fact. There are all types of amenities like water, health checkup, and transport. This is the fourth fact. You see here now I have 4 supporting details. Sometimes circus shows and magic shows entertain the city people. This is the 5th supporting sentence. In conclusion, this word shows me that I started with a concluding sentence. Now you can have a fully entertaining life in the city. If you notice that the topic sentence is very similar to the concluding sentence, but I have different words. That's what I mean by restating the main idea in different words. Okay, there's only one missing thing here, that we didn't use a lot of transition signals. Let's add them. For example, here we can say to start with. I can say to start, or to start with, and I put a comma after it. The second, after I finish the first supporting sentence and I want to start with the second supporting sentence, I can say also. Simply, I can say also, comma, and I write the second supporting sentence. I finished from it, I want to start with the third supporting sentence, I can write moreover. Okay, and so on. There are a lot of transition signals to use while writing. Okay, so we have reached the end of our lecture this week. I hope that everything is clear for you. Watch the video, revise the lecture, and get well prepared for the worksheet at the end of the week. Bye bye.